Hi everybody, my name is Claire Davis. I work on the education and advocacy team here at Oregon Tilth. I often work one-on-one with producers, answering questions and creating educational resources on all things organic. So today's video is about the mammalian species livestock organic system plan. We have plenty of other walkthroughs for the other types of organic system plans, including crop, handling, livestock avian species specifically, and we have a special extra video specifically on the organic fraud prevention plan. So I'm excited to do this walkthrough with you today, and as always, feel free to reach out to our team if any questions arise during this video. If I go ahead and share my screen here, you can see that I have all of the modules for the Livestock Organic System Plan here in my File Explorer. And you can see that all of these modules have different letters involved in them. There's a lot of different letters. L stands for livestock, P stands for poultry, A stands for avian, NR stands for non-ruminant, R stands for ruminant. It can seem a bit confusing, but luckily the L1, the livestock activities checklist, which we will go to together first, is meant to specifically guide you on which forms to fill out depending on your operation and the animals you raise. So the forms are separated by letter and animal like this in order to save you time so that you're not looking at forms that don't apply to your operation. You can skip any forms that are not relevant to your operation, kind of as deemed by that L1. A big note before we get started, use recent revisions of our organic system plan forms. Our certification officers who review your application can only review forms that are a year to 2 years old. So the revision date, using the L1 as an example, is at the bottom of each OSP module. So in 2025, which is when this video was made, you're looking for a 2023 or 2024 date down here. You can also check with Oregon Tilth at any time to make sure you have the most recent and updated version of the OSP documents. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and get started with the L1, the Livestock Activities Checklist. You want to start with this form, as again, it will guide you for which forms you need to fill out based on your operation. Begin by writing your operation name at the top, along with the date, and then we will just go through this checklist together. So, number 1, we are applying for Oregon Tilth Organic Livestock Certification. Presumably, yes, you would fill out the O1, the OFPP, the L1, the L4, the L9, and the L10. Next, for those of you out there raising mammals that are not ruminants, such as swine, you will need to fill out the L2M, the L3NR, and the L5M. For those of you raising ruminants, such as cattle, sheep, goats, or any other mammals with multi-chambered stomachs, you will fill out the L2M, the L3R, the L5M, and the L6, which covers your pasture management plan for those grazing critters. Only operations raising ruminants need to fill out the L6. The next box, I perform any of the following activities on farm, or a contract facility performs the following: selling organic products, including live animals, milk animals, cool and store their milk, mix, mill, or grind livestock feed for use on farm, wash and or pack eggs, cool, age, cut, and wrap meat or processed fibers. You're going to want to fill out an L7, the livestock product processing, storage, and packaging module. And then finally, if you transport any organic livestock, you'll want to fill out the L8 for sales, labeling, transport, and handling. And then another important note with this box here, we grow crops, including forages, pasture, and or have outdoor access for livestock. If you are applying for livestock certification, you must also apply for crop certification. This is because livestock, including poultry, are required to have access to outdoor areas with soil and vegetation. This could be a yard, a pasture, you name it, but that land and its subsequent crops, even if it's just grass, requires certification for crops, as these organic livestock would be interacting and maybe pecking at or eating those crops almost daily. And so you're going to want to check out the C1, the activities checklist for growers in the crops organic system plan. So we're going to start with the O1, operation information. This is a short form that's incredibly important. It gives us all the information we need about the basics of your operation and how we can get in contact with you. So again, you want to start with your operation name and the date at the top. Note that your operation name must be a singular legal entity, aka the entity under which you pay your taxes. If your legal entity is your own name, but your operation is called Cockadoodle-Doo Farms, you would write your own name or the legal entity name, DBA, doing business as Cockadoodle-Doo Farms. Now, if Cockadoodle-Doo Farms is itself a registered LLC, you can put the farm name LLC. You can have any number of DBAs or fictitious names as long as you're following state requirements on that. You cannot have two different taxable entities listed on the same certification per the NOP guidelines. Moving on into expedited services. Some people need certification as quickly as possible. At this time, at the recording of this video, our expedited services are $4,000. The cost of this covers the additional staff and time required to process that certification more quickly than the standard process. So if you are getting expedited services, be sure to click that box there. If you are not, just let us know when you anticipate needing certification. What's your goal date? If this date is critical for you, be sure to get in contact with us and apply at least 4 to 6 months in advance of that date. If you wait a week before your desired certification date to apply, there's unfortunately just no way that that process will be completed in time. So give yourself lots of time to apply so it's not a nerve-wracking buzzer beater situation. Okay, moving on. Is the operation name listed above a legally registered business? Ideally it is. If it's not, get in contact with us. The operation name listed above produces or handles both organic and non-organic products or organic products only. It's totally fine to do both organic and non-organic products under the same entity. You'll just have to have some more record-keeping requirements, and we'll talk more about that later. Number 3, DBAs or fictitious names. Enter them here, and we will add them to your organic certificate. Some states do require that you register your DBA or fictitious name, and some don't. So you really want to check with your Secretary of State on that. Moving on into contact information, this is really important. We'll start with addresses. You have your mailing address, your billing address, and then the primary location to be inspected. For this inspection location, the address must be a physical address that an inspector can go to and meet you at. It can't be a PO box. If the area getting certified doesn't have its own address, that's totally fine. Coordinates work great, or you can list an address where the inspector can come meet you and you'll both travel to the inspection site together. Moving into contacts, the legally responsible contact. So this is someone with their name registered with the state and has some legal stake in their business. The legal, primary, and billing contact can all be the same person. That's totally fine. And the legal contact doesn't have to have any communication with us if they don't want to. Now, the primary contact, this person should be able to reliably answer their phone or check their emails. We need to be able to get a hold of this person to request more information on your operation if needed. So everyone who's listed here as a contact can make changes to your organic system plan if you say that's allowable. Any of these people can call us and get information about your OSP. Now, if someone is not listed and they want to add to your organic system plan, we cannot tell them anything about the file to protect your confidentiality. All people listed here should be folks in the business that you would authorize to make changes or have information about your organic system plan. Okay, moving on into background information. Indicate all scopes of certification that you are applying for below. Recall that if you're certifying livestock, you're probably also certifying crops. For land in transition, that's land that has not yet met the eligibility date of 3 years since the last application of a prohibited substance. So if you're transitional, that means you're in that 3-year transition state. Oh, and handling and distribution may apply to you. If you're making any value-added products from your livestock or their byproducts, and you want those to be certified organic, those value-added products, or if you're performing any slaughter of livestock on farm, you will need a handling certification. Note that that's not just a ticked box here. A handling certification requires a totally separate handling organic system plan to be filled out. Luckily, we have another walkthrough of the handling organic system plan in a different video. Now let's look into the certifications that you might be interested in. USDA National Organic Program Organic, likely the seal that you're looking for. There's some other certifications listed here. Maybe you're exporting, maybe you need some equivalency, maybe you want the Be Better certification. Get a hold of us to talk about those if you're interested in them. Have you reviewed the applicable standards? Number 3, this is important. If you filled out our request form online for an application, then we sent you a link to the regulations in your welcome email. We also sent Oregon Tilth's procedures and fee schedules. So we want to know if you've reviewed the standards. Have you reviewed our procedure manual and fee schedule? We want to see yes ticked on all of those. And then if any other regulatory agencies inspect your operations, this could be the FDA, the state health department, anyone who comes to your operation to inspect it, we just want to know about that. And this won't affect anything, but it's helpful to know you have those inspections or any negative scoring that may have come from those inspections. Again, those won't prevent you from getting certified organic. It's just something we want to know about up front rather than find out about later. Keep on going here. Have you ever been certified before? We will and can find out either way. It's publicly available information for us, but it really is best to fill this out now so we can know up front if you've previously been certified. If you have some old non-compliance issues, we can totally help you navigate those. And if you were suspended, we can help you get reinstated. If you're brand new to certification, just mark no and skip to question 5. For folks based out of California, if you are located in California or selling products in California, you will need to satisfy California state requirements for that. So you'd apply to the CDFA for organic registration in the state of California. It's simple and relatively cheap, but you would need that completed before you can apply to Oregon Tilth. So that can take some time. Definitely recommend starting that process now. Let's talk about fees now. So by and large, there's going to be 2 fees. There's going to be the certification fee and the inspection fee. The certification fee is to pay our certification officers for their time and expertise, kind of that administrative part of reviewing your application, requesting any additional information, and making sure you are in compliance with the organic regulations. The inspection fee is separate from the certification fee, and that is charged hourly based on how far the inspector needs to travel to get to your operation and how long they spend on your operation inspecting. So I definitely recommend having your records and everything kind of ready to go before the inspector arrives, as that will save you time and money. Let's see, what else do we have here? For those of you who are new applicants to Oregon Tilth, there is a one-time new applicant fee of $300. And lastly, production partnerships. Some folks have partnered with production partners. For example, dairy producers sometimes partner with Organic Valley. You would know if you were in a production partnership, and you would just want to indicate that here. If you're a standalone business, not in a partnership, just move right along. Feedback in this last section. We really value this feedback and we read all of it. So if you have any comments for us, please feel free to provide them here, and we're super grateful that you took the time to do so. It is critical that you sign the end of this document, sign the end of the O1. And it's also really important that you check this box allowing for an electronic signature. So you want to include your name, your title, your date. You can also print this out and wet sign it if you'd prefer that, but we do definitely need that signature before you move forward, because this, your organic system plan, is your contract for certification. Okay, here we are in the L5M Livestock Origin for Mammals. Remember, you want to put your operation name and the date up at the top, and then you want to mark the species of animal described by this form. Definitely recommend filling out a separate L5M for each species that you're raising, as it can be a bit convoluted to try and describe the origin of multiple species on your operation in one L5M. It'll be more straightforward to just split it out into multiple. Make sure that you attach a complete herd list. Your in-house templates or lists are totally fine for your herd list. There's also a template for a herd list in the Oregon Tilth Help Center available online. We're going to want different herd lists for different species. And then you don't need to list out every single individual unique identifier. You can write, let's say, replacement heifers are C105 through C182. As long as each group can be uniquely identified, that's what we need to see. So as a reminder, organic livestock must be managed organically from the final third of gestation. Dairy herds are the only exception to this rule. Dairy herds can go through a one-time, one-year transition to organic, meaning they are managed completely organically in compliance with all regulations for a full year's period. And then their milk products may be sold as organic from then on, as long as they are managed as organic from then on. Their meat, however, can never be sold as organic. Feel free to give us a ring if you'd like to discuss more what a dairy herd transition process looks like. And then for sourcing animals, we want to know if you breed and raise your own. Do you buy from another certified organic operation? Is your breeding stock non-organic in origin? If so, that's fine. We just want to know the details. And a big note here is that if you buy an organic animal from an auction yard or broker, that auction yard or broker must be certified organic as well. Moving on to number 6, do you grow animals on contract for other operations or processors? So we would like to know if you do this or not. Raising animals on behalf of another farm or contract. In those situations, we just need something like a herd list that inventories all of those animals. If you're not currently doing that, but you think that that is something coming up for you within the next year, get in touch with us and let us know that you will be growing animals on contract, but you don't yet have your organic certificates. Okay, 2.2, the livestock profile and the production group table. So here we want you to identify each production group, and those are groups requiring different dry matter demands or managed separately from other groups for some reason. So for a dairy herd, this would look like milk cows, dry cows, bred heifers, unbred heifers, and then calves 0 to 3 months in age and calves 3 to 6 months in age. We really do want that granularity of each of those production groups. And note that you'll use these same production groups across other modules in the OSP, so please try to keep them consistent. We want to generally know the number of males and females. We know that this number changes over time, so this is just to give us a quick overview. No need to complicate it. Just give us a snapshot of your whole herd or stock. And then give us an idea of the products. If they're for milk, but eventually to be slaughtered, be sure to include both milk and meat so that we can include on your organic certificate so you can legally sell that organic meat. Moving on into animal identification, number 2. How do you uniquely identify your animals? Number 3, kind of describe this identification system a little bit more for us, and then a special note for dairies. Transition dairy animals, while able to produce milk products, are not eligible for slaughter and sale as organic meat products, like I mentioned before. So we're going to want to know how you tell these animals apart from organic slaughter eligible livestock on your operation. Number 4, if you raise both organic and non-organic livestock on your operation, be sure to let us know and fill out the rest of the details on this form. Tell us how you keep those animals separate, both in your records and in reality, so that contamination and commingling of your organic livestock is prevented. If you only raise purely organic livestock, skip to the L3R for ruminants or the L3NR for non-ruminants like swine, or do both if you raise both. If you do raise both organic and non-organic animals, just answer a couple more questions for us, and then you are done with your L2M. Okay, folks, here we are in the L3R, livestock feed and water for ruminants. Again, you should fill one of these out per species. It's a lot more straightforward if you do that. Production groups or classes, if you call them that, are split out within this form. And recall that those are typically groups that have different dry matter demands. So for dairies, as an example, remember that was milk cows, dry cows, bred and unbred heifers, and calves under 6 months of age, typically divided out into 0 to 3 and 3 to 6 months. Dairy operations can have more production groups, but they can't have fewer unless you truly don't manage a group, like you purchase bred heifers rather than raising any calves. And a quick overview of the relevant regulations for this section. Organic livestock must only consume 100% certified organic feed, including the pasture that they graze. And then during the grazing season, the length of which varies from region to region, but what must be a minimum of 120 days, at least 30% of ruminants' dry matter intake must be from grazing on pasture. This is an average of 30% across the entire duration of the grazing season. So this is really the heart of this module and also what makes the ruminants OSP different from the avian and swine species OSPs. So with that, this note about dry matter intake, attach your DMI plans for each class of ruminant for any animal over 6 months of age. And if you're unaware of the NOP's requirements for dry matter intake from pasture for ruminants, please feel free to give us a call. Our team would be more than happy to clarify those requirements with you so you can come into this process feeling informed. For 3-1, go ahead and give us a general idea of your feed rations and where you source your feed rations from. And then moving on into the grazing season table. So again, use the same production groups that you listed in your L5M minus any swine. This is just for ruminants. And you want to leave the last column of this table empty for organ tilths use. We will calculate total dry matter from feed using the information you include in the rest of the table. So if you feed different amounts of rations during the grazing season, so not in the winter in the barn, for example, one fed ration early in the grazing season, and then you feed a different one later in the grazing season, be sure to split out those differences here and make note of the time periods that each ration applies for. And that would be in the production group column. Just include the season that that ration applies for. We don't need exact dates. You can just say spring or early summer. You are more than welcome to attach your own forms or spreadsheets rather than filling out this table, as long as your in-house documents include all the information that we request here. And the reason we're asking for all of this information when you apply is for a sanity check on our part, so we can ensure that that 30% average dry matter intake from pasture requirement is at least reasonably likely to be met or achieved by your operation. For the non-grazing season, please just provide the same information that you provided in the previous table. And finally, dry matter demand table. So you can use various sources to determine the dry matter demands of each of your production groups. Maybe a nutritionist helped you put together a ration plan, or you used the publicly available tables from the National Organic Program to determine the dry matter demand for your animals. Either way, just let us know your source. And then number 3, how do you ensure that your ruminant animals graze at least 30% of their dry matter demand from pasture over the grazing season? So let us know your calculation methods that you've done to ensure that you do meet this requirement. Maybe your animals are fed 100% from pasture during the grazing season and no calculations are really needed. If, however, you do supplement the grazing season with fed rations, tell us how you've calculated that at least 30% of your ruminants' DMI is being met via pasture. If all of this about calculations sounds like mumbo jumbo to you, again, please reach out to us. We would be happy to explain this process and the steps to these calculations. Finally, we're going to talk about water. So just tell us about your water sources for the drinking water for your animals, and if you add any additives to that water, or if you treat it in any way. And if you do add any materials to that drinking water, you just want to be sure that you include those materials on your L10, your livestock materials list. Okay. That does it for the L3R. I will see you in the next module, the L4. Okay, this form is all about the feed and water for your animals. Note that at the top there, it states that for each species of animal that you'd like certified, you must complete a separate feed plan. This is true. However, if you're raising 2 different species that have essentially the same fed rations with some minor adjustments, you can just fill out one L3NR. If you're raising 2 species who have totally different diets, we would definitely recommend filling out multiple L3NRs, one for each species, especially because this form is for any animal that's not a ruminant, and so swine are included here too. You would definitely want to fill out separate L3NRs for chickens and swine, for instance. Just like the L2 and any other module that you'll see today, the relevant National Organic Program regulations are here at the top. So again, you'll see this across the entire application, and that's intended to give you clarity about what we as a certifier need to know about your operation to ensure you're managing it in compliance with the organic regulations. So check them out on each form. They're very helpful. To give a quick overview of the regulations, just a paraphrasing, all feeds for livestock need to be certified organic, not just raised with organic practices in your beautiful garden. They need to be certified. You're going to want to be particularly cautious about letting any poultry or swine access compost piles. These are not necessarily certified organic if non-organic kitchen scraps are in there, for instance. And if birds get out of their paddock and start feeding on anything that's not certified organic, it's really important to document that and self-report. So start by checking the boxes of whichever species of animal apply for your operation. In section 3.1 regarding livestock feed, begin by selecting all sources of organic feed that you use. This could be on-farm 100% organic ingredients. This could be off-farm 100% organic ingredients. It could be bulk feed from a feed mill. And if it's not one of the ones listed here, just provide us some details in this other box. The next question asks if you import any organic feed ingredients or grain products from other countries, mark yes or no, and if yes, tell us which countries you are importing from. And then a no for those folks, you want to be sure you have the import documentation for all of those products, including the import certificate for each shipment. In this table, provide the feed ration information for each of your production groups. If you don't prefer the format of this table, that is totally okay. You can attach separate spreadsheets with this required information instead. You're probably keeping track of it somewhere anyway. But you want to list separate rations for each production group. So for a layer operation, that's often chicks, pullets, laying hens. Or for swine, it could be boars, unbred sows, gestating sows, lactating sows, piglets, and growers. Right. So you have your production group, that can be the species plus age or stage of life that's relevant. And then you want to have the name of the ingredient or supplement. The last few questions just ask about your water sources for livestock drinking water. How do you ensure that water is clean? Do you add any additives to it? If so, just be sure to list them in that last section of this form and include them on your L10, your livestock materials list. And then as far as water additives, just be cautious with those, really do your due diligence on them. For water treatments, how you clean your water, what's the source. If you're adding chlorine, we want to know. And then if you're using black lights, we also want to know. It's not a compliance issue, but we just need to know about your water treatment practices. Okay, with that, we are ready to move into the L4 Livestock Healthcare. Okay, L4, Livestock Healthcare. Let's dive in. In this section, you'll mostly be detailing what preventative healthcare methods you'll be utilizing. That is always the first line of defense in an organic system is preventative methods, first and foremost. Any medications or other healthcare products that you use will be included on your L10, your livestock materials form, a little bit later. It is recommended that you fill out a separate L4, a livestock healthcare plan for each different species of animal that you're trying to certify. If you're raising animals that are technically different species, such as chickens and turkeys, but they have really similar healthcare practices, at least on your operation, you can just fill out one L4 and make clarifying comments when needed for which practices apply to which species. But if there's more variety in your healthcare practices between your different groups of animals and their healthcare treatment looks pretty different, you definitely want separate L4s. I know that that can feel like a lot of paperwork, but this form is actually much more straightforward to navigate if you focus on one species at a time. It's a lot less convoluted, it's easier for you to fill out, and it's easier for us to review promptly. So start by selecting the species that are described by this form, and then for 1, 2, and 3, you want to check these boxes that match which strategies you use to manage your animal's health. We certainly don't expect you to check every single box, but we do want this insight into the methods that you use for prevention-forward healthcare. The next section we're getting into is physical alterations. If you do not perform any physical alterations, click this NA box and skip to the next section, 4.3. For any physical alteration that is performed, be sure to detail it in this table. We want to know the alteration, the age for the animal at which that alteration is performed, and then the method of alteration. So for example, maybe you perform disbudding on your cattle at 1 month of age with a hot iron dehorner. And then in the following section, tell us how you minimize pain and stress during this physical alteration, as well as who performed those alterations. Okay, 4.3, parasites, diseases, and illnesses management. Start by telling us the common disease or health issues that your livestock operation faces, who is in charge of making treatment decisions. When a vet, number 4, when a vet prescribes a medication or administers treatment to an animal, tell us how you ensure that that treatment goes on to your L10, your livestock materials list, and isn't forgotten about. Okay, skipping down to 4.4, let's talk about medication use. In the lens of livestock healthcare, let's talk about the differences between a restricted material and a prohibited material. Restricted materials can be used in organic production, but only under specific conditions, while prohibited materials can never be used. So an example of a restricted material could be like a local anesthetic, like lidocaine. This material does require oversight from a licensed veterinarian. And then once a restricted material is used, the animal must enter a withdrawal period during which no organic products can come from that animal until the residues of the restricted material have left their system fully. For prohibited products like antibiotics, the NOP does require that you do provide all appropriate medical care to ensure that an animal does not suffer or in extreme cases pass away, even if that means using a prohibited material. For example, maybe a dairy cow develops acute toxic mastitis and it quickly turns into a life or death situation. Antibiotics, which are prohibited, are the only thing that will help. Antibiotics are prescribed by a vet. The cow then improves, yay, but then that cow must be removed from the organic herd. From that point on, her milk or meat can never be sold as organic. So that's the difference between a restricted and a prohibited material. So, all that to say, for number one, restricted materials, how do you separate that animal that's been treated with a restricted material or track it to ensure it's not contributing organic products during its withdrawal period? And then for two, prohibited treatments, how do you ensure that that animal that received a prohibited material, such as antibiotics, is identified and never mistakenly represented as organic from that point onward? We're going to skip forward a little bit into 4.6, biosecurity monitoring. If you have any biosecurity measures or a written plan, be sure to include that information for us, especially if you have a preferred order that inspections are performed in, for example, youngest animals to oldest. If you don't do much biosecurity, go ahead and skip to 4.7, monitoring, and then tell us how you monitor the effectiveness of your livestock healthcare plan. How are you ensuring and documenting your flocks, drifts, and or herds are staying healthy? And with that, that concludes the L4 Livestock Healthcare. We are moving on into the L5, the L5A for avian living conditions, and the L5M for mammalian living conditions. Here we are in the L5N. This is livestock living conditions for mammals and non-avian species. That includes all ruminants and swine, anything that is not poultry. And again, we'll want you to fill out one L5M per species, same as you did for some previous modules. You will be breaking that species out into production groups or their classes within this form. As always, a brief overview of the relevant regulations. Housing must allow for normal animal behaviors like stretching and exercise. You must allow access to the outdoors. For bedding, if it's roughage that could be consumed, it must be certified organic, but forestry products do not need to be. And then finally, for temporary confinement, this is allowed for short periods of time for a number of reasons, including inclement weather, danger to livestock, medical treatments, and sorting. So those topics are what we'll be discussing in this L5M. So start with 5.1, give us a general idea of the climate and weather patterns in your region and how they impact animal housing and when they can access the outdoors. And then for number 2, attach a map or a photo of all of your livestock handling facilities. So this is anywhere that livestock pass through or exist in, like housing and shelter, the squeeze chute, and then any outdoor areas. And there's also a handy list just below this, kind of listing the information that we're looking for in that map or drawing or diagram. For number 3, same as before, break this species into its production groups and tell us about each group's living conditions and the space available to them. And then moving on to section 5.2, indoor housing. These questions are pretty straightforward, so we're going to go ahead and just skip to the cleaning and disinfection portion. So do you have any cleaning or sanitization practices for your livestock housing, the pens, the runs, the equipment? If so, you just want to be sure you include any cleaning materials used on your L10, your livestock materials list. If so, you just want to be sure you include any materials used on your L10, your materials list. And then you just want to make sure that your livestock are prevented from coming into contact with any of those cleaning materials. And then same goes for pest controls. Are there pest controls in any of the livestock areas? And if so, how do you keep your livestock from getting into those pest control materials? On to the next section, 5.3, outdoor access. Outdoors or outdoor space is defined as any area outside of an enclosed building or enclosed structure, including roofed areas that aren't enclosed. So, for example, an enclosed housing structure with open sides would not be considered outdoors or outdoor space. A roofed area over soil and vegetation that the livestock can move freely in and out of is considered an outdoor area. So number 2, asking a bit more about the outdoor access areas in detail. If those areas have any soil, then adequate vegetation must be maintained, kind of depending on the climate and the species. For example, swine need to be able to root around and wallow. In general, people just typically give a high level view of what their vegetative cover, if any, in a given area, like a corral, looks like. Just give us a general sense of what's going on there, what's growing there that animals can come in contact with. And then give us your best description of the outdoor areas available. Is it a muddy feedlot, or is there some degree of dry grass that's in dormancy in the summer? And the reason we're asking about these is because of the sensitivity of the land. If the reviewer sees that your livestock are hanging out in a mud pit, we just want to make sure there's some vegetative cover so that the animals have somewhere dry to hang out, and so that that vegetation is holding that soil in place. It's not just getting ripped up and washed away or blown away. Speaking of washing away or blowing away soil, for number three, livestock operations often face troubles with runoff of manure and soil erosion. So, what are your methods to prevent these things from occurring? Maybe you routinely scoop your manure or you routinely rotate your livestock to allow vegetation to recover. Section 5.4, start to get into confinement. So for section 5.4, number one, how do you record any temporary confinement of animals specific to that animal's unique identifier? And then 5.5 is about temporary confinement of all species, and it's for any time that is not the grazing season. 5.6 asks specifically about confinement of ruminants during the grazing season, confining them from pasture. It helpfully lists all of the allowed periods of confinement for different reasons, but note that any ruminant, regardless of temporary confinement, must meet the 120-day minimum grazing rule. Confinement is often evaluated on a case-by-case basis. If an animal is sick or injured, of course, animal welfare will come before other requirements. We just want to make sure that you're not confining animals from pasture because it's convenient for your operation to do so. Finally, 5.7, swine confinement housing. So you want to complete the table listing the periods and types of confinement utilized for swine. Swine have to be group housed with access to the outdoors, except for the situations described in this table, such as reasons like aggression or farrowing. All right, that is a broad overview of the L5M. If you raise ruminants, go ahead and move on to the L6, all about pasture management. If you don't raise ruminants, then we'll see you in L7. Here we are in the L6, the Livestock Pasture Management Plan. If you are viewing this section and you do not raise ruminants, move right along. This L6 is just for ruminant operations. So kind of the two main goals of this module are to ensure that your pasture management plan kind of indicates that you can supply a 30% minimum average dry matter intake to your ruminants across the grazing season. And then we also want to make sure that your pasture is responsibly managed in order to protect soil, water, and any other natural resources on your operation. Complete a separate L6 for each different ruminant species on your operation. All right, jumping right in to 6.1 pasture management. Let us know when you generally begin and end your grazing season each year, or if you have year-round grazing. And then for number 2, pasture maps, we want locations, size, individual ID of fields and paddocks, any permanent features like fencing and structures, and then finally call-outs for shade and water. We ask a couple more details about your grazing conditions and the types of pasture available. And then number 5, for grazing methods. Again, let us know the size of the paddocks, the density of animals per paddock, when ruminants are rotated, and when pastures are rested. In the next section, we are interested in knowing about your pasture management practices so that you can ensure that you have enough grazing materials available for ruminants to reach that 30% minimum average DMI across the grazing season. And then for number 7, do you have any practices that help reduce the outbreak and spread of diseases and parasites, especially if you have some soggy or muddy areas or some wetlands where those things tend to thrive? As we all know, for number 8, grazing can be kind of intense on the land, so we want to know how you maintain or improve biodiversity and natural resources when it comes to grazing and your grazing areas. Do you prevent overgrazing? Do you plant some native species? Just let us know what your general practices are there. And then 9, similar, how do you protect sensitive habitats like wetlands and waterways, etc.? And there you have it, folks. The L6 is pretty short and pretty straightforward, so we will see you in the next module, the L7. Here we are at the L7, Livestock Product Processing, Storage, and Packaging. Now, this form is for the handling of raw organic products prior to sale and not live animal sales. For any live animal sales, we will use the L8 form. So this form covers milk, eggs, feed, fiber, meat, etc. If your operation processes multiple products, it will likely be easier for you to fill out one L7 per product grouping. For example, if you produce both eggs and milk, fill out one L7 for the eggs and one L7 for the milk. And one quick note before we jump in here to the L7, if you are slaughtering any animals on your operation, that always requires a handling certification in addition to your livestock and crop certifications. This L7 form for the Livestock OSP covers processing procedures outside of slaughter. So you want to start with any on-farm handling, like milking parlors or egg washing stations. Tell us basic information about this facility and what activities are performed there. For 7.2, attach a map of any processing or storage areas. This can be hand-drawn, a bird's eye view, but you just want to be sure to include equipment that has direct contact with organic products, call-outs for product in versus product out, indicate any non-organic handling that occurs in the same space or facility, or if it's a dedicated organic space, go ahead and call that out too. And then sometimes other like state agencies will ask for very specific dimensions of doorways. We don't need that for your organic certification. We just want to know about the processing details and the equipment that you're using. And then for number 2, either describe your product flow or attach a schematic or flow chart that calls out how the product flows through the facility. Where is it received and what steps does it go through before storage, if applicable? For 7.3, product processing, we want to know how much processing is occurring at your operation. Is it just packing and labeling, or are there supplementary ingredients from off-farm, not including salt, that are being used to create a value-added product? If that is the case, you may need a handling certification in addition to your livestock certification. Just get in touch with our team if you think that may apply to you, and we'll discuss it and walk you through that process as needed. And then just include any materials that are used in processing on your L10 materials list and attach a photo of the label for each of those materials. Moving along to 7.4, commingling prevention in processing. So this applies to any operation where processing of organic goods happens on the same equipment as the processing of non-organic goods. So if that applies, just let us know how you prevent commingling or contamination of your organic products and non-organic products. For example, organic products are always processed first, followed by non-organic products. Or there's a specific and documented cleaning regimen for the equipment after any non-organic goods pass through. Tell us about your cleaning and sanitation process and submit an established standard operating procedure if you have one. Make sure any materials used for cleaning or sanitation are added to your L10 materials list. And then finally, water source, number 5. Tell us about the water quality. If any testing has confirmed the presence of contaminants in the water in the last 2 years, that's just something we want to know. And then for 7.6, storage facility practices. Do you store livestock products while maintaining ownership of those products while they're in storage? If so, we want to know where they're being stored, what is being stored, and how. In this documentation column, we're looking to see if the storage facility is certified organic. If so, attach the organic certificate, the OC. If the facility is not certified organic, attach an Oregon Tilth Independent Storage Information Sheet, the IS. You can find that on our website at tilth.org. And then if the facility is owned or operated by you, go ahead and mark that storage facility under own. 7.7, contracted facilities. This is asking if you contract any other entities to handle or process your certified products. If so, these facilities must also be certified organic, or the final product is not able to be sold as certified organic. So for each facility you contract, if any, make sure to attach their organic certificate. Finally, in 7.8, packaging, container, materials. Let us know the materials used in your packaging that are in direct contact with your product. Are all of the packaging materials verified to be free of prohibited materials? This is including fungicides and preservatives. And is that verification from the supplier attached? This could be a letter or an email from the manufacturer. And then for sustainable-minded folks out there who might be reusing packaging, was that reused packaging only ever used for organic goods, or was that packaging used for non-organic goods? If so, it could potentially have come in contact with prohibited residues, and you just want to be really careful about that. Okay, folks, that is the end of the L7. We are going to go ahead and move on to the L8, livestock sales, labeling, handling, and transport. Here we are at the L8. You will want to, as always, start with your operation name and the date at the top, and then you'll want to fill out one L8 for each species of animal you raise. So indicate here which species is described by this form. If you sell live animals, fill out questions 1 through 3 in this section, and if you don't sell live animals, go ahead and skip to question 4. Note that for number 3, if live animals are sold as certified organic at an auction yard, that auction yard or broker must also be certified organic. So you're going to want to attach their organic certificates to your application. For number 5, for labeling, there are specific guidelines for organic label designs. You can view these guidelines on our website, or you can call us and ask any questions. We'd be happy to help you with that. An example of one of these guidelines is that the organic seal cannot be modified. It must remain either in its black and white form or its standard color form, straight from the NOP. There are a few other considerations around label design as well. So if you label your own organic goods, go ahead and attach color photos or proofs of your label design to your application, and then Oregon Tilth will gladly walk you through those labeling rules as needed. For number 7, do you use any bulk containers for shipping or storing? If so, how are those containers identified as containing organic product? And how do the container IDs tie back to your traceable record keeping system, that audit trail? For 8, do you plan to pack your own organic product using organic labels owned by other companies? So let's say that you're packing eggs on your property using the name and label of a larger company that you're selling the eggs under. If that company is certified organic, attach their organic certificate to your application. If they are not certified organic, go ahead and attach a private label agreement form, a PLA. Moving on to number 9. Number 9 asks what organic products you currently or will pack for others. The label claim is very important here. For a product to be called organic and to be able to use the organic seal, at least 95% of the ingredients must be certified organic. 100% organic means exactly what it says. Every single ingredient in the product is certified. If products have multiple ingredients, be sure to attach product formulation sheets in number 10 to your application. Attach 1 sheet per product. And then for 8.2, international labeling and export compliance. For those of you who sell products internationally, there are some additional considerations for labeling and equivalency arrangements. So if you do not export goods, go ahead and skip this whole section. If you do, go ahead and tell us which countries your operation exports to. And then for number 2, make sure that Oregon Tilth has checked over your labels before you print them all. This can be a really expensive mistake to make if you realize your labels aren't up to standard and must be reprinted. Note that we have an entire team of folks here at Oregon Tilth who can help you navigate the paperwork needed to export or import organic products. We're going to go ahead and skip to 8.4 here, live animal transport. So we want to know what animals you're transporting, if those animals are fit for transport, as in can they walk on their own, are they doing okay, and then who's responsible for that transport for number 3. Is it you, your employees, a contracted transporter? And then for number 4, animals in transport must be protected from cold and stress and have appropriate ventilation. Poultry crates do not require bedding for transport, but for other livestock, bedding is required. And then, of course, this last checkbox here, how long are the animals in transit for? We want to make sure it stays below the federal 28-hour law, which prohibits transporting livestock in interstate commerce for more than 28 consecutive hours without unloading them for feeding, water, and rest. Number 5, are the animals clearly identified as organic throughout the entire transport process for all involved parties? And then for number 6, are animals ever kept on land that is not part of your organic certification? For example, temporary holding pens used for long trips. This is kind of circumstance dependent. If this is the case, go ahead and get in touch with us and we can talk in more detail. It really depends on how long those animals are being held for and who has the title at that time. So let us know the specifics of how that's all kind of looking. And if you are using any auction yards, go ahead and call us to talk about that as well. For number 7, what is your plan to address any animal welfare concerns during transport? If travel times exceed 8 hours, how is organic management maintained? What are the emergency plans if travel conditions or length of transit aren't what was expected? And then lastly, for number 8, if you contract the transport of your animals, either complete this section here or attach a statement from the contractor. We want to have their name, their contact information, and a signed affirmation that they, the contractor, will act in accordance with you, the producer's plan for animal transportation. And that wraps up the L8 onto the L9 record keeping. All right, for the L9 livestock record keeping, this form gives us an overview of your record keeping systems from acquisition or birth of an animal through feed rations to medical treatments, all the way to the sale or death. Like many other OSP forms, if your operation is relatively complex and you have multiple different record keeping systems in place, maybe one for broilers and layers and another for dairy cows, we would recommend filling out one L9 per distinct record keeping system. If you only raise one type of livestock and have one record keeping system, then one L9 is totally fine. You're going to see that there are a lot of checkboxes here. Just select the ones that apply to your operations records. And then for number 6, scrolling down just a little bit, how you maintain records. I just want to make a note here that the National Organic Program does require that you keep records, but they do not require the specific format that those records have to be kept in. So make sure that your record keeping system is in one or maybe multiple formats that works for you and your operation. In section 9.2, we get a little bit more detailed. The NOP requires that you keep your organic records on hand for 5 years, so don't go throwing them away the moment your annual inspection is over. You want to keep those in a secure and accessible spot. Number 5, this ties into the audit trail exercises that are performed at each and every inspection. We want to see that your records offer total traceability from the beginning of that organic product's life cycle on your operation all the way to the end of its life cycle on your operation. For example, maybe your record keeping system starts with a birth log. When a calf or piglet or chick is born, you mark the date and create a unique identifier for the calf or piglet, or perhaps a lot number for the chick if it's in a flock or house. What we want to know is that the origin of your livestock is organic. For mammals, this means that their mother, and therefore the animal in utero, were treated organically from the final third of gestation. For poultry, this means they were under organic management from the second day of life. After the birth or purchase record, maybe next comes your feed rations, then medical records and treatment notes. We just want you to walk us through each step of your system, all the way through processing, transport if applicable, and of course, final sale. For the monitoring 9.3, how do you know that your record keeping system works? Do you perform practice audits ever? Have you ever noticed holes or missing information? And how did you close those gaps? And then does everyone that's responsibly connected to your operation, all your team members, have knowledge of the record keeping system, have access to the record keeping system, and can explain it? And if you're like me and you really want to have your bases covered, I recommend keeping a backup. For example, if you keep paper binders, is there a backup binder somewhere if something were to happen to that one? And then finally, section 9.4, record keeping for organic and non-organic livestock production. If you produce both organic and non-organic livestock or livestock products, we really want you to demonstrate that your record keeping system is designed to distinguish between those two groups. Remember that we don't want any accidental commingling or contamination of organic livestock. So how do your input records Distinguish between organic and non-organic applications of materials, and how do your production, processing, shipping, and sales records distinguish between organic and non-organic products. Maybe each organic animal has a special identifier throughout all records, or maybe there are two entirely separate binders or systems for records for the organic part of your operation versus the non-organic part of your operation. If you have any additional questions about record keeping and the types of records you need to keep, do not hesitate to reach out to us. We are happy to answer any questions that you might have and kind of give you ideas to develop that audit trail friendly system. And with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to the L10, the materials list. Okay, with the L10, our livestock materials list, here is where we want to know every single material or input used on your operation. This includes feed supplements, healthcare products, pest controls, sanitizers used on production surfaces, really any and all materials that play a role in the production of your organic goods or animals. And then for this big old table, you are welcome to use this table and use this format, or you're welcome to upload your own list like a spreadsheet as long as it contains all the same information. So what we want to see is full product name, the full manufacturer name, the third-party review agency that determines that this product is indeed approved for organic, and then the material's intended use. So when it comes to materials, you want to be wary of folks at chemical supply stores saying, oh yeah, it's organic, but there isn't an organic label on the bag. And then you also want to be careful of just assuming another certifier's approval means that Oregon Tilth will approve it. For example, your neighbor who is certified with CCOF and CCOF approved the material, that does not necessarily mean that it's automatically approved by us as well. It's likely, but it's not guaranteed. So you just want to be careful about that. For any materials that are not listed as organic approved under WSDA or OMRI or a different third-party review agency, be sure to attach a photo of the label for those products so that we at Oregon Tilth can take a closer look at them for you. The final module of your livestock OSP that we have not yet covered in this video is the Organic Fraud Prevention Plan, the OFPP. This lucky module gets its own walkthrough video linked in the description below, as it applies to pretty much every operation type. Lastly, I just want to encourage producers to reach out if you have questions. I know that the OSP can seem kind of daunting, but we have a whole team of people who are very passionate about production and organic ag who would love to answer any questions that you might have, either about the OSP, about certification in general, or about your production practices. So please feel free to reach out. Thank you again for partnering with Oregon Tilth in your organic certification journey, and I wish you the best of luck.